Welcome to the Parish the Thought Show. The opinions of Brian, your host, and his guests have not been sanitized or scientifically tested, so please consume at your own risk. Now, here's Brian.
Ladies and gentlemen, and whoever else is listening, welcome back to the show and happy Halloween to all of you dark, death-loving people. Today, in light of the passing of Friends superstar Matthew Perry and all the recent and not-so-recent celebrity passings, my guest is Cary Snowden. He has been writing some of the most creative and heartfelt celebrity obituaries I've ever seen. So jump on in for a stroll into the macabre, the funny, the witty, and sometimes a little heartbreak as we talk about his connection to the famously departed.
Want to keep it. No, it's awesome that you do that. It's because otherwise you just get it from the news, but the way you do it, it's almost like you have a vested interest in that person, like you're a fan of them specifically. And so anyway,
in most cases that's kind of true, and in some cases, if you've been watching, I kind of don't like that person for some reason. But back when this started, it's I don't know how long I've been doing it. Actually, I was kind of scrolling through Facebook to see if I could find when I made that first post, but it's been a long time. It's been over 10 years that I've been kind of posting those, and it just sort of started. I forget who the first person was that I posted. I was going to go back and actually try to look it up. I don't know if I can go back that far in my history, but it kind of started with someone I knew, someone I was following, and you're right. I do kind of pick the ones that people that have had an influence on my life, right? So, and sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, but it kind of derived, back in the day, Elvis Presley would finish up his show and they'd always say, folks, go home. Elvis has left the building. And I always thought that was kind of a funny way to say that, right? Actually, by the way, we go out to Hawaii and I've got there's always a little sign on somebody's door that says, mahalo, thank you.
Yes.
Mahalo for taking your shoes off. And I was at the flea market out there once, and I've got it posted up here. It says, mahalo for removing your shoes off. And so, sort of a double negative in there or something. Yeah. And anyway, it kind of doesn't make sense the way it's written. But I've always thought about that when you hear them say, Elvis has left the building. It's kind of this weird past tense phrasing. And so I decided that I would kind of throw that first obituary up like that. And, for some reason, it just sort of caught on. And as I kind of, people would ping me privately, they'd send me text messages and say, hey, did you hear that so-and-so has died? And then after a while, it became, hey, did you hear that so-and-so has left the building? So it kind of stuck and took off from there. But yeah, that's been a lot of fun. And it's actually grown to be something that people kind of recognize me for. And I never intended that. But the other interesting thing too, is now I hear when everybody dies, and I hear it pretty quick. As soon as someone hears, I usually get 5 or 6 text messages right off the bat. And that's try to jump online and beat the story as much as I can.
So you've got your little minions out there doing your work for you.
I do. I wouldn't call them like that, but yeah, it's friends and family that know that I will post something for them if they give me the scoop on somebody dying. So it's always, sometimes it's a shock. Sometimes I have to sit back and kind of think about it for a minute. How did this person influence my life, or do I care? Sometimes I get a note and I don't write anything about them because I don't know them or I didn't follow them. So I would say, most of the ones that I posted are people that actually had some kind of influence on me. And that's why I like to put together just a little small story about them on my timelines, because there's a lot of people out there that I've listened to or that had some kind of influence on me that I learned from, that I want to share a quick story about. So
You're like the obituary whisperer.
again, I never intended it to take off like that, but
Which is why I think had you intended it, it may not have been as successful. I mean, success I don't know how we just define success, but I know that it's influenced me just watching those, and just I think you've always been very articulate from when we were back in the business networking groups,
yeah.
15 years ago. You're always very articulate. So you've just, I think, carried it over, but you're so well written. And I've always noticed that. And you really do a phenomenal job with these. Not just, yeah, Bob died down at the gas station and his family's taking his truck.
Yeah. Again, some of these people have had some influence on me. So I try to take a moment to write. You'd be surprised too. Sometimes I'll get a note, and I have to kind of reveal my brother is actually, he listens to radio a lot while he's working. So he hears some of this news like right off the bat, and he'll shoot me a note really quick. And I might be in a weird spot too. So I've written a handful of these, with my thumbs on my phone, and try to get a little research in. There's another part of the story is that I've had a few kind of gotchas where somebody has seen, these things float around the internet all the time about celebrities dying when they really haven't. And they'll shoot me a note and say, oh, I actually just saw one. Sean Connery is one that got me. But it got me late. I had already written Sean Connery has left the building. And about a year later, someone wrote me a note again and said, Sean Connery died. And I panicked. I was in a hurry, wrote something up and posted it. And then everybody starts piling on and saying, hey, that was a while ago. So I've gotten in the habit of doing a little more research now before I kind of do a quick panic and post something up. People have kind of come to rely on my stories to be at least a little bit accurate. So,
well, you could maybe take the same, angle as the weatherman. Those ones are right. They're close.
Yeah. It was right if you spin it back a year, or maybe that person. I have written a few and this has only happened 3 or 4 times, but seems there were a couple that I posted and wrote some, big gushing, oh, I love that person, only to find that they hadn't yet died. So we kind of feel bad for people who may have read that and maybe were related to those people or something, but.
Or maybe you go back into history and you can pull up, like horrible people, and you're like, yeah, we're glad they left the building.
Well, I've said that a couple of times about people that I just didn't like. It seems like, I can't remember everybody that I've put together here, but it seems like I wrote one up on Jeffrey Dahmer at one point. And kind of an awful story, a horrible person that no one likes, but at the same time, as I kind of decide who I'm going to write it up, I think, Jeffrey Dahmer had influence on all of us who have kind of experienced that whole news story, and then all the way up into his dying. It was, you kind of look back and go, man, that was quite an experience for all of us. So.
And yeah, especially in light of the fact that film just came out last year, or this year. I think it was just this year, right?
Yeah. By the way, I haven't watched it. I'm an avid murder podcast listener. So I've heard that story in detail a couple of times. And when that show came out, I talked to a few friends of mine. They said, wow, they did a great job, made it really accurate. It was right on. And I just kind of sat back and thought, I don't think I can take that story again right now. I need a break.
Yeah, it was a fascinating film. And again, you can make a movie, say anything you want, but if it was accurate, he was evil, but he was so aware of his evil and knew that it was a problem, but he was just so addicted to it. And you really
Yeah,
felt bad for his father. The dad
absolutely.
just, poor dad.
I always turn to the families of all of these kind of serial killers and think, man, they just never intended that to happen. And as a parent, you think, oh, how, if heaven forbid one of my children went wrong like that. And thankfully it doesn't look like they ever will, by the way, for the record.
Yeah, for now. Yeah, no, I saw, and I know we're getting off topic here, but that's okay. That's what the show's about. Tangents. Somebody said that there's like 400 different genetic type things that your kids come into the world with. So if our kids are horrible or they're very successful, we want to take credit for that. Like, I'm like, no, they're a product of your entire genealogical line. So you shouldn't, couldn't, can't take credit for things they do or say or how they turn out, not necessarily in parenting styles, but just they just come a certain way.
Yeah, there is a lot of complexity to that. And maybe to bring it back to these little snippets that I write up too, that's something that I've kind of learned from myself as I put these together, right? So a lot of these people are people I would never write about just in the course of a casual day, but it's just kind of become a thing that friends and family expect of me. So it's always a moment of reflection, by the way, to kind of ponder, all right, how did this person influence me? What did they do? And maybe how did they get there? And what does that mean for anybody right now that they're gone? They've left the building. So what does that mean for us? Are we upset about it? Do we wish they were still around for some reason? Prince would be a good example of that. Prince was a tough one for me because I was a big fan, really liked the guy. I thought there was a lot more to him than him ending at that time. He was pretty young relatively. And I kind of go back even, I don't remember if I wrote Michael Jackson up or not, but I'm thinking of him for a second right now too. And just how young they were and how they were kind of both at a turning point where, man, we could have got some really great things out of them if they had survived that moment for somehow. So kind of touching. And some of them are kind of hard to get through. I kind of have to sit back and, dry my eyes, allergies getting to me a little bit and think, oh, kind of really bummed this person's gone. And like I mentioned before, though, some of them you kind of go, oh, not too upset that person's gone, which is maybe not the way we should always remember people, but sometimes you just got to be honest about how you think of that.
Yeah, we're so polite sometimes, and it's like, no, he was an absolute dick and was mean to people, and not that he deserves death, but
sure,
the natural course of things. Like, I have some family that when he passed, I was just like, he was mean to me all the time. And
yeah, and
I didn't, no tears shed.
I totally get that. And yeah, as I kind of think through some of these people, you kind of go, it builds a lot of self-reflection to me, because you start to think kind of our pre-discussion, a little bit earlier when we were just kind of reconnecting, but is what am I doing with my life? And maybe thinking about what my
will say
might be someday too.
I think that would be a good, just a random, like, have a party, write your own, like, invite people over and write your obituary.
You could make a game of it. Actually, you could sit everybody around a table and maybe have everyone write a line. So everybody writes their name on the paper, and you pass it to the next person. You got all friends or family in the room, and everybody writes the next line of the obituary. And maybe you fold them up and go home and read it later and see what everybody thinks.
Well, it could be like, the whose line is it anyway? You could say, whose obituary is it anyway? Make a game out of it, like literally an actual board game.
There you go. And you go around the table, and then now you have to read them and decide who around the table that actually means.
Yeah, like, okay, yeah. That could be good. I think we're onto something. I think you're onto something.
That.
So of all these,
Yeah, that could be a fun one.
the 10 plus years you've probably been doing this or more, is there one that stands out that, you know, touched you the most, or some? And I know they're Hollywood stars usually, and so we just like, yeah, we they influence us, but we don't know them.
Yeah, there's a few. So I'm just kind of wandering through some of my notes here. Um, none of them really. Maybe Prince kind of stands out a little bit to me. We just talked about Prince, and I remember that's one that was a little more of a mind bender for me. I'm a big Steve Jobs fan, and to be honest, I really don't get that emotional when people die. I've just come to accept it as part of how the world works. And but the Steve Jobs passing really kind of affected me. He was so young. I was a little bit angry at him for making the decision that he did. I don't know if you know that story very well, but Steve actually knew that he had some health problems, and it's not that he ignored them. It's more that he chose not to treat them because he had some concerns about invading his own body. He didn't want to be cut. He didn't want to go in. And had he done that when he discovered the problem, he probably would be alive today. And I think he grew to regret that moment. And as a big fan too, I had watched his path through his life. And by the way, Steve Jobs was a major jerk, really.
That's what I hear.
Really
yeah,
a jerk.
Complete asshole, but
right.
Really.
He really was. And I have some kind of firsthand accounts of that too. Working in the high-tech industry, we actually had Steve Jobs come to one of our events and speak. And he said some pretty nasty things to a very close friend of mine. And I just, it kind of makes you go, it's kind of the idea that maybe you don't want to meet your heroes, right?
Yeah, because they're just falling off his pedestal.
Yeah, a little bit. And a little bit frustrating for me, but still, I do admire the work that he did, and I admire his work ethic and how he kind of focused in. And so with all of that, kind of his death was one that was a little more troubling to me, just because he had influenced my life so much with the equipment. I mean, my whole desk is just full of Apple stuff right now. And, my life has been improved so much by the things Apple has produced and that I've taken advantage of. And what else could we have if we didn't lose that great mind? But honestly, that kind of applies to a lot of them. I'm just, again, looking at my notes here. Don Everly is one that I just kind of randomly scrolled to.
Is that the Everly Brothers?
The Everly Brothers. He's one of the Everly Brothers. And I grew up listening to the Everly Brothers as a young 10 and 12-year-old, and even had their albums. We had the turntable, and we would play Everly Brothers. I love those guys.
Turntable. Wow. You just dated yourself. For you
Yeah,
youngins, that's called a record player.
That's called a record player.
For you extra youngins, that's them music boxes.
Yeah, that's right. So, I don't know. I more recently too, I'm a big Depeche Mode fan, and we just lost Fletch, and
who was I was not a Depeche Mode fan. Very familiar with him, but not a fan. So was he the lead vocal or one of the band members?
No, he was actually one who was not very active in songwriting or even the song playing. He always toured with them, and it was kind of an insider's joke about, what did Fletcher do? What they called him, Fletch. What did Fletch do? And the response to the insider joke is that he clapped. He'd always just clap over his head like this to the music while he was kind of fingering a keyboard off in the corner. And everyone loved him, and he kind of had a reputation for being the guy that sort of did the business end of the band work, kept them all together, and was kind of the mediator when things got a little rough, but almost contributed very little to the actual songwriting and producing of who Depeche Mode came to be. Just sort of played a little bit of pre-recorded keyboards off in the corner. Probably one of the luckiest guys in the music business, because I don't think he could hold his own. He just happened to have a couple of great friends that brought him along for the ride. But regardless, as a super fan of the band, that was a bummer. It kind of put a little bit of a timer on my favorite people now. So you think about the Everly Brothers. I grew up with them, but even as a young age, they seemed like they were just older, right? They're kind of part of that older crowd. They're supposed to die at some point. My bands, Depeche Mode, they're not supposed to die yet.
Yeah, because they're just about 10 years older than you are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat with Def Leppard.
Exactly.
Been a fan for, pushing 40 years, and those guys are like 15 years older than me.
Yeah.
So and you start to see it. You're like, oh,
I just saw them a few months ago, by the way.
Yeah. They're still amazing. They haven't produced an album as good as Hysteria in 1987 since.
No.
As good as that, in my opinion. But so I still have that. But
yeah,
you think about that. You're like, ooh, that one will probably affect me when one of those guys goes.
Yep. And it does. It was just kind of a bummer. Again, Fletch wasn't a kingpin of the band, or cornerstone maybe, or keystone, I should say. But so the band lives on, and we're expecting more from them. It's down to 2 guys now, and but still, you kind of go, shoot, I could lose my favorite thing if one of those guys dies. And wow, seems like that could be right around the corner. And not to be too macabre about the whole thing, but yeah, you do start to reflect and go, time's ticking away. I better get doing something fun, or enjoying my life and spending time with family. Those are the things that are important to me anyway.
Yeah. Or just, again, how's someone gonna write mine? That makes you think twice.
Yeah.
About the choices you make. So
yeah.
So what's been the most unique thing that's happened since you've been doing this?
Probably getting invited to do a podcast about it is certainly on the top of the list.
This is the pinnacle of your obituary writing career.
This is it right here.
Wow. Pressure's on.
I mentioned earlier, I literally, now that we're kind of talking about it, I wish I had time today to scroll back and really see where this all started. I forget who the first person was of what kicked this off. But like I mentioned, I never intended this to kind of take off. It was just sort of this half joke thing about has left the building. And, some people didn't even understand what that meant at first. And it's just grown to a point where people are expecting it, right? I'll post something and people are like, whew, I was waiting for you to post that. And I get a lot of private messages. They're not always posted on the live post on Facebook. I'll get private messages from people that will say, thank you, or great job, or I don't agree, or even just, wow, I've been waiting, kind of holding my breath to see your post. And that's like, I really kind of never intended to be something people were even looking forward to. And now I kind of feel like it's a little bit of an obligation. The minute I hear that someone has died, I feel like, all right, I got to stop. Hang on, everybody. Let me go over here and think for a minute, make sure this is the right person, and type something up real quick.
It's like your hobby is calling you now.
Yeah.
It does that.
And not even intended to be a hobby, really, just
just your thing. It's like my show here. I've gone like 2 months without doing an interview, and it just starts grating on me. I'm like, somebody's story. There's something out there, a story trying to get out.
Put together. Yeah. So, and I kind of, since we started talking, actually, the last 3 or 4 weeks, I thought, what I ought to do, because I'm in the web business too. And I thought, shoot, I ought to go collect all these up from Facebook and publish them out on my own site. Keep it as a private site, just so I can go back to my own notes without having to thumb through all the other junk that's up on Facebook.
Yeah, because they're fun, and
So
it's sort of a well, it's a little history. It's a little history book.
right. Yeah, it would be my own kind of thoughts and history about it, and maybe even something I would pass on and
Because
kind of
yeah,
share some thought.
birth announcements are boring. Death announcements, you've got something to write about.
Yeah. You've got something to kind of ponder, something to think about. How did they influence me, and what did I do with that information? Maybe were they entertaining? Did I like them?
Did I
I
hate
get a
them?
little political on some of these. Some
Yeah.
of them have been, a lot of them are entertainers. Some of them are political. Some of them are just sort of business people like Steve Jobs or something that influenced me in some way. And, sometimes people care and sometimes people don't. I get 30 and 40 comments on some and 6 or 8 on some and 100 on another. So it's kind of all over with people of who they're impressed by and who they care about. Kind of interesting.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. And what else haven't I asked you about this that you want to share? Maybe.
Well, I don't know. I mean, again, it all started as sort of an accident. So not something I ever really intended to share and kind of talk about as something, but it has turned into something here. And like I say, people kind of start pinging me if I haven't written something up there within a certain time frame. People go, "Hey, where is it?"
Dude, step it up, man. We got
some pressure my way. So it's become a fun thing. Actually, I actually quite enjoy it. And it's been kind of a fun thing to kind of look at some of the names that come across my feed and that I notice and think, again, just to kind of think about what did they do? What am I doing? And how do I represent this person as far as they influenced me? It's kind of a fun thing. Shouldn't be fun because these people are dying and that's not a fun thing for them and their families. So,
well, it's happening anyway, so might as well make it fun.
It is.
Right.
I agree.
Like when I go, I hope they're, a little sad that my absence makes a difference, but I don't want them to be all bummed out forever.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't either. And that's probably part of this kind of a cathartic experience too, is just saying, I hope when I go that maybe there's some sorrow for a day or two, but hey, get back on your feet and go do something that I wasn't able to do. That'd be fun.
Perfect. Thanks,
Well,
man. I appreciate you coming on to share. It's been fun. And how can people reach you if you want them to? Maybe you don't want them to.
Well, if I wouldn't want to give my phone number out for a text message or something, but you can always direct message me on Facebook. Just out there is Cary Snowden. So yeah, if you hear of anyone dying, shoot me a note.
That's right.
So I can beat the
press.
Beat the press. Exactly. And then, maybe I'll circle back to you if I do. I'm kind of toying with the idea of putting my own website up together, make it a little more of a historical thing and just keep track of it for myself. Not really to make it too formal or anything, but that'd be, maybe I'll put something up there that people can reach out to me somehow on a forum or something.
Kind of a digital cemetery.
Yeah, there you go.
Ooh,
there you go.
Dang, mic drop.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Thanks so much.
Thank you again for listening to The Parish the Thought Show. We know you have many podcast options and appreciate that you have chosen us. If you love what you hear, please give us a rating on whatever platform you find us. And don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. If you hate what you hear, only tell us. You're still here? Click on the next episode for more from The Parish the Thought Show.